All right, let's go to our next caller here, and this is Michael. Michael, how's it going, Michael?
Good. How you doing, Bart?
Good.
All right. So this hand was played at Parks Casino, outside of Philadelphia, and
Okay.
it's 10-10 no limit. And right now they have that game running max eight-handed, but at the time of this hand, it was seven-handed.
So is this just the Tuesday game, or is it running several times a week now?
No, it's running pretty much every day now. Maybe on like a random Monday, you only have like one table or it won't run, but in general, it's pretty much always running. But if you go on like a Wednesday or Thursday, it's a lot of grinders.
Uh-huh.
Uh,
I mean, I remember going there, God, I want to say maybe 2012 or 2013 or something like that. We had a little meetup. We had an East Coast meetup. It was actually when I recorded if you guys are Crush Live Poker subscribers, I recorded the first CLP, the first C-Bet bluffing matrix. I think I recorded from a hotel room outside of Philadelphia. I had gone to Borgata and I had gone to Parks. I played in a mixed game that Mac Lance hosted, and I think I played some 10-10 too. Okay, so 10-10 no limit.
all right. So the hero's in the big
This
blind
is like
with,
a 3K cap game too, right, or something?
yeah,
Yeah,
3K cap.
yeah. Okay,
Um,
from what I remember.
but
Yeah.
like on Tuesdays you'll get a good like 3-4 games running. So
Uh huh.
like and they're
Yeah.
all like three of them will be must moves and you'll get some pretty deep stacks.
Uh huh.
Okay, but this was played on a Saturday.
Okay.
So heroes in the big blind with Ace of Hearts, King of Clubs. The main villain is Under the Gun,
Mm-hmm.
and the main villain is 3650 effective. So pre-flop, the Under the Gun villain opens to 50. There's a flat
Is
from
that
the
a
button.
little bit larger than normal?
Yeah, so this guy had just sat down about 2-3 orbits before. I had never played with him before. As soon as he started talking, sitting down, the only backstory I really had was that he had moved to Vegas to play like full time pretty much after the pandemic hit, and he was
Mm-hmm.
playing at Bellagio a lot. But
Mm-hmm.
this is definitely bigger than standard open, which I noticed right away. Most people actually open to 30, and that it's probably like 50% open to 30, 50% open to 40, something like that.
Okay, so button calls. Yep.
Yep, button calls. Clear three bet here from the hero. Hero three bets to 250.
And you cover the guy, right?
Yes.
Okay, so to 250, so you go like about 5x or 4x times, 4x the raise plus a limp, which I think is fine, obviously, from out of position, especially this deep. And I don't know, Michael, are you a website subscriber or not? I can't remember.
I'm not anymore. No.
Okay, so I just did a podcast, the last two podcasts on the primary, the Crush Live Poker podcast that comes out on Tuesdays. I did Big Blind Play, Heads Up, and Multi-Way. One of the things I covered too, Heads Up, is that sometimes in a very tight configuration, and I don't know what you would have done with the under the gun, if somebody raises from under the gun in like a 9-handed game, although I think you said this might be 7 or 8, you can absolutely have some flats in the big blind with some strong hands. Ace King off maybe being one of them. Here, of course, you have a very easy squeeze, but I don't know what you would have done if it had just gone back around to you or what, but just something to
Yeah.
note.
Once in a while, I will flat with Ace King against an under the gun open if we're playing like 8-handed in these games.
Mhm.
But with the call in between, I'm 100% three betting here with Ace King.
Sure, of course. Okay, so you go up to 250.
Yep.
Uh-huh.
Under the gun thinks about it for a little bit, and he calls,
Okay.
and the button folds. So the pot's 260 to the flop. I'm sorry, 560.
560, right? Button folds. Okay.
Flop is 9 of hearts,
Yep.
5 of hearts, deuce of hearts.
9 of hearts, 5 of hearts, deuce of hearts. And hero has ace of hearts, king of clubs. Okay.
Yep.
Yep.
Hero bets out for 200 here.
Hero bets 200. This is kind of interesting here because again, tight configuration, 3-bet, right? 3-bet pot. Your heads up against UTG. You've got ace of hearts, king of clubs. And the board comes out 9 of hearts, 5 of hearts, deuce of hearts, and you bet 200. This is where I think if even for guys that play sort of live poker, and you don't have to go to Pio Solver, but this is where I think that using some computer aid is helpful. And there are some shortcut techniques, like you can use that app, what is it called? Solver Plus. I think I had an affiliate deal. I've talked to CLP subscribers about that, where you sometimes will have to shortcut it because sometimes it's only at 100 big blinds. The point is that I would like to see the output here in a given scenario of what is optimal. And I'm not saying that I would take the optimal line per se, but it would be interesting. Big blind versus under the gun in a super tight configuration, what quote unquote optimal post flop play would be, especially with sizing on a board like this with the ace of hearts. Sometimes I think that this might actually be reflected as a check because you're probably checking a lot in this given spot, and you could make the case that the defender, the guy that opens, is usually going to have more suited hands than you are. Obviously, it changes things when you might be three betting a little bit of a wider range because of the flat call on the button. But these are interesting things to note. In general, I would say when you three bet from out of position in a tight especially in a tight configuration, the person who opened probably would tend to have more suited hands than you would. So I would think that a lot of boards fundamentally, or sort of in theory, are checked. Here with the ace king with the ace of hearts, you don't really have to protect against a whole lot, and you have sort of the nut no pair. I'm not saying that I wouldn't bet here. It's just something to note. Did you ever consider checking here?
So I think I'll do some checking here with aces with the ace of hearts, kings with the king of hearts, but I think like players flat way too wide in these scenarios. Like I think you'll see flats in this situation with like sixes, sevens, eights. Not that those are all too wide, but even like threes, fours. And I think we can get some better hands and some hands with a good amount of equity, even if it's not a ton of equity to fold, like even like the random like Jack 10 suiteds and those kind of hands. I think even on like those kind of disconnected high cards, we can get a lot of folds from a lot of the hands that I just said. Even like on a Jack, Queen, River, these can be scary, and we can kind of fire multiple barrels here.
Well, any pair here that has a heart in it has to be a call, even if you use, you use just like maybe 35% sizing. I mean, maybe if you had like black sevens with, maybe when you use this type of sizing, it's, maybe he finds a fold. What I will say though is that if anyone is in this spot and facing a c-bet like this, if you have a 5-out hand, meaning that you've connected with the board, even if you didn't have a heart, you are supposed to continue. So if, for example, your villain had like 5-6 of spades, that's actually a much, much better continue than, for example, like sevens, like black sevens, I think. You know what I mean? So, okay, so you bet 200.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Under the gun calls. So now we're 960 to the turn.
Okay, 960. Yep.
Turn is the 5 of clubs.
So 9 of hearts, 5 of hearts, deuce of hearts, 5 of clubs. Again, hero has ace of hearts, king of clubs. Okay.
Yeah, I don't really. This is a pretty bad card, I think, for my exact hand, and probably a better card for his range than mine. I think I'm doing a ton of checking on this turn. I'm not actually sure. I think I'm betting my flopped flushes again here on the turn, but I'm not sure if I'm betting too much else. So here are checks.
I don't see. I think that the 5 might not be. I mean, the 5 isn't as the 5 is not as irrelevant as like if it was a deuce. But if you really get into it, the tighter the configuration, the more sort of this middling a card, especially on a ragged board, is going to be irrelevant. Now, with that being said, he can have some ace 5s here. But like if the turn was a deuce, it really would be entirely irrelevant in a very tight configuration. Where you have to start checking on cards like this is like if it's a button open and you're 3-betting small blind and you see like a very, very large volume of hands, I would say. But I don't know if this, like, I kind of want to continue and maybe even run a triple barrel here, to be honest with you. Because I don't think the 5 really changes that much. And you've got a boatload of equity, and you can sort of decide whether or not you want to, fire river depending on textures of cards. But in this specific configuration, I think it's actually a decent card for you. I just don't know how represented UTG is going to be here with the 5.
Yeah, it's not that I think that under the gun here is going to actually be represented with the 5. It's more that I don't think he's going to fold a lot of the hands that he's calling the flop with. And I think players tend to over defend to these types of 3-bets when they have a caller behind them that like they think that they could get like a call behind and are like getting kind of like pot odds in that way. Like, I don't think he's going to fold sixes, sevens, eights here. Is
Well,
kind of
right. But that doesn't necessarily mean, though, that it's always a check. Like, you can set up, even if there isn't a whole lot of fold equity, if you're going to triple barrel, unless you're going to just use crazy overbet sizing on the river, like 3x after it goes check, check on turn, it lends itself to a larger bet in general. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree, but I actually will also overbet this river if I get a favorable river and this turn goes check, check, and I think I can put a ton of his hands into a really tough spot there instead.
So you check, and what happens?
Villain bets out 550.
So UTG bets 550. Now, that's a little bit of an odd sizing from UTG. I always talk about sort of variable turn sizing, and then someone sort of mentioned, they're like, Bart, you say variable turn sizing. What does that mean? And really, I probably should come up with another kind of word. It's sort of variable hand strength betting from your opponent on the turn. Like, if you put yourself in your opponent's spot, whether it's a 3-bet pot or a single raised pot, you can do a lot of 1/3 on the turn in a spot like this with protection hands, with very, very nutted slow plays on flop, and then also with some bluffs. Now, because the configuration is so tight and you hold the ace of hearts, when you really look at the hand rating, your opponent really shouldn't have an offsuit heart in his hand here, right? When you have the ace of hearts. It's very difficult without a pair. You know what I'm saying?
Okay, yes. Then
yeah,
yes.
An offsuit heart without a pair. So it's kind of hard for me to find a bluff here. You know what I mean? Like, because it's not like he's got king, queen with the king of hearts here all that often. But with that being said, you know, he bets 550 here, so the pot's going to be about 1,500. You're getting about 3-1. I find it pretty difficult to fold here. And then once in a great while here, Michael, it could go check, check, and you might have the best hand. He could be stabbing here with like ace, queen with the queen of hearts. I mean, that might be the one hand, right? Maybe the one hand. But I don't think I can fold here, getting 3-1 with your hand.
Yeah, no, I definitely don't think I can fold here, especially because I think like most of the time my ace and king outs are also clean.
Right.
So hero calls.
So what do you plan on doing, by the way, if an ace or a king were to come that's offsuit? It's kind of interesting because you sort of get in this quandary. By the way, the pot is probably maybe like 2040, something like that.
I have it at 2060 now. 2060.
And as I talked about last week, too, when I played that hand at the lodge where I put it up on YouTube as like chilly $30,000 cooler, people were like, oh, the river bet is awful. You can look on the YouTube. When I had King Jack, which was a heart draw, and then I made the backdoor flush at the end. And my counter to that was I wasn't playing the hand like a bluff catcher. I was playing it like a draw. If you were playing a hand like a bluff catcher, then okay, sure, it makes no sense to lead when you accidentally run into the nuts or you make a really strong hand. But for example, here, Michael, I think you'll agree, you're not really playing your hand like a bluff catcher here, right? You're just taking your equity on the turn. For the most part.
Definitely.
So what happens when you hit an offsuit king or an ace?
Yeah, I think an offsuit king for me is a lot better just because opponents are going to be a little more fearful if the offsuit ace comes off, that I can have a lot of ace high flush draws. I'm leading out on both of those cards though, for sure. Okay. I think my sizing is going to be a little bigger with a king than with an ace, kind of exploitatively, but
right. And the reason why I bring that up is because I agree with you. I think it almost has to be a lead if you're playing a draw and you hit your draw in this manner, right? So the whole idea of, I check called turn, it makes no sense to bet on the river. That's not valid unless you're specifically playing, a hand like a bluff catcher. Anyways, okay, 2060 to the river.
Yep, and the river is the 3 of hearts.
So you make the nut flush, but of course the board is paired, right? I guess there's one combo of straight flush, but that's not really going to be represented here. It would be very unlikely that any of the low sets are really here. I think as played, again, it's the 3 of hearts, so it's not, even if he went down and was opening threes, it would be black on the flop. He's not going to call unless he's insane on the flop. So, and then there's, is he opening fives and even defending? If it's just nines full, really is, if you were looking at like a reasonable pre-flop type of thing, right? That you're losing to here, I would assume.
I do think players are definitely opening fives here. I don't think fives should be defended to a three bet. Certainly not at like the sizing I went to, but
Right. But
nines I think is
it's
definitely playing.
and also too the thing with fives is it's such a partial when you go down the line because not only would it have to be defended pre-flop, but then it would have to be played in this manner too. And there's only one possible combo. So if you really look at it, you get to a very, very partial combo of fives because even liberally, if we said, okay, he's going to defend with fives here 50% of the time with a guy behind him, then there's only one combo available. So now you have half a combo. How often is he calling the flop? Times how often is he betting the turn with quads? It gets to the point where it's almost irrelevant. That's why I think it's really nines full or sort of nothing here. So 2060, and you guys have, I don't know, what, 25 and change, something like that left?
Yeah, 2650 about behind.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think about this one for a little bit. I'm always betting here because I'm never letting this go check check. I think that there's too many hands that he's betting on the turn here, like tens with a heart, jacks with a heart, queens with a heart, that I can get a lot of value from here. So I bet out, and I'd be interested to hear your thoughts on this sizing. I bet out for 1300.
It's interesting because another thing that you could say here, I don't mind the sizing if you ever turn something into a bluff here. I mean, when you're playing at this level, you should try to inherently be a little bit balanced. So are you ever turning an overpair that's not a heart into a bluff? I'm trying to think of some of the bluffs here that you might have. The other thing, so actually, you know what? 1350 might be a little bit large. I actually think a more efficient sizing might be 1/3 here. Maybe 700 to 800 to, sort of guarantee the hard X calls, and then maybe you have some bluffs, because I don't know if bluffs would be taken for this sizing. Now, you could play a little bit on the flip side and say, well, he's just going to fold out all the pairs that don't have a heart in it, and he's going to do a lot of calling. But I think that you can see this is a more extreme scenario when the pot gets this large, where maybe someone's not going to call with jacks, with a jack of hearts to 1350, and they are going to call with 7 to 750. The other thing, too, that I'll say is that could this possibly be a situation where sometimes you might actually want to take a value own line, but it would have to be really extreme. And what I mean by a value own line is that could this be a situation where if you check, your opponent will value bet a worse hand, like a second nut flush, or a third nut flush, whereas if you bet, they would fold? Probably not, right? Because what are they betting here on the river that might be a value, and it's probably going to be the king of hearts, which means it's probably king. It would be a disaster, queen checks behind. So, and those hands are probably going to call,
Just I did bet out 1300 here. Sorry, not 1350.
Oh, okay. Yeah, 1300. Yeah.
So yeah, I just don't think I see a lot of villains. I actually think that you might get a call sometimes in these games even more from a sizing like 1300 than like 800 or 900, just because players think it looks a little more bluffy. And I just don't really see like those overpairs with a heart really folding to the sizing, which is kind of why I chose it. But I do agree with everything else that you said here.
So what happened?
Villain jams for 2650.
2650 total or 2650 more? 2650 total, right?
Yes.
Wow, that's insane, because you're going to be getting an insane 2650 total. So 33. So the pot's going to be like 6,000, and it's like 1300 for you to call.
Yep. Pot's going to be, if I would call, the pot would be 7360. That's how I do. Sorry, I do this math a little different. So I guess the pot would be 6,000, 1350 to call, yeah.
6,000, 1350 to call, because I think of it like, I know what you're doing too, because you can find equity out that way. I mean, it's insane, right? Because like we just went down the line, and really the only hand that you're losing to here is nines full, but you have the ace of hearts. It's a 4-flush run out. I don't know. In this spot, I can't make this fold getting this price, because if you're going to fold the ace of hearts, then I know sometimes it's not relevant, but it's just the best hand that you ever have here, right? Except if you had nines full yourself, I guess, if you squeezed.
Yeah, I definitely am squeezing nines here with the overcall. So I do think I have nines here.
It's such an underbluff spot though too, because of the 4-flush, right? I mean, because it's a 4-flush, again, one of these situations where on 4 flush runouts, they're really, really under bluff because anyone can have the stiff ace. You're getting like 4 or 5 to 1, something like that.
A little over 4 to 1, yeah.
I mean, I think I probably flick in the chip here, but it's just gross because there's so little full houses that can be represented here. In like I said, in the form of, it really is, it's just nines full. What did you end up doing?
Yeah, so I tank here for a good 5 minutes. I'm just thinking about like what you say, like there's no real bluff I can find here. Like online, if you were scaling against some super pro, you might find like 9-10 suited somehow turned into a bluff.
Right,
that blocks
right.
nines full.
Right. Mm-hmm.
And like I had no reads on this villain, and if I had known like anything about him, maybe that would have swayed me one way or another. But I was just getting an insane price here, like 4.2 or something to 1, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
After like 5 minutes, I like say, I know you're going to turn over the winner, but I call.
Mm-hmm.
And he flips over 5-5 for quads.
It's unfortunate. Someone in the live chat said, "What's his bluff? The King of Hearts." No, none of those. Well, why would the King of Hearts bluff? Which is the second nut flush here, right? What would be the point of that? Yeah, it's just the price is just astronomical at the end, but it's a cool call. I appreciate it, Michael. Thank you very much. If you enjoyed this video, please hit that like button and be sure to subscribe to this channel down below.